Monday morning, I received an email from my boss. My office, 8:30, don't be late. No subject line, no explanation, just a cold command. I knew immediately. It was either cuts or it was me. I'd once saved this company from $1 million contract collapse. Turns out that was only worth them asking me to. Take half my salary. My name is Charlotte Miller. And at 38, I'd built my entire career at Virexon Technologies. Single mother to 7-year-old Lily. I'd climbed from junior analyst to director of business development through countless nights of spreadsheets and strategy sessions. That Monday morning in Denver's gray November drizzle felt different. Though heavy. Gavin Rhodes sat behind his mahogany desk like a king on his throne. Our CEO had always been calculating. But today his eyes held something else, the cold efficiency of an executioner. The office smelled of his expensive cologne and fresh coffee, a stark contrast to the bile rising in my throat. Charlotte, he began, not bothering with pleasantries. I'll be direct. We're restructuring. I'd heard that word before. It was corporate speak for bloodletting. The board has decided we need to optimize our cost structure. He slid a folder across the desk. Your position remains, but at a 50% salary reduction, effective immediately. The numbers stared back at me from the paper. Half. After 8 years of 80-hour weeks, of saving their biggest accounts, of missing Lily's school plays for emergency client calls. Half. This is non-negotiable. My voice stayed steady, though my hands trembled slightly in my lap. You can accept the new terms, or... He let the alternative hang in the air like a guillotine blade. I understood the game. Force me out without severance, make it my choice. And he knew, God, he knew, about my mortgage, about Lily's therapy sessions after the divorce, about the medical bills that never seemed to end. He'd chosen his target carefully. I need time to consider this. The words came out measured, professional. Inside, something was breaking. You have until tomorrow morning. Gavin's smile was razor-thin. I trust you'll make the practical choice. After all, you have responsibilities. The walk back to my office felt endless. Colleagues averted their eyes. They knew. Everyone always knew when someone had been to the executioner's office. I closed my door and stared at my desk. Photos of Lily, awards from successful campaigns. A coffee mug that read, World's okayest mom, that she'd given me last Christmas. 8 years. I'd bled for this company. Just 6 months ago. When the Morrison Industries deal was falling apart, a contract worth 40% of our annual revenue. I'd flown to Chicago on my own dime, spent 3 sleepless nights rebuilding the entire proposal, and saved it. The board had called me a hero. Gavin himself had promised I was integral to Virexon's future. Integral, apparently, meant worth exactly half of what I was yesterday. I thought about the mortgage payment due next week, Lily's birthday next month, the college fund I'd barely started. The numbers swirled in my head, each calculation leading to the same conclusion. I couldn't afford to leave, and Gavin knew it. But I also couldn't afford to stay. Not like this. Not as half a person in their eyes. The rage came slowly, building from somewhere deep. Not hot and explosive, but cold and clarifying. They thought they had me trapped. They thought a single mother would fold, would accept whatever scraps they offered because what choice did I have? They thought wrong. I sat in my car for 3 hours in the empty parking garage, engine off, watching rain streak down the windshield. The numbers kept spinning in my head. Mortgage, utilities, Lily's therapy, groceries, car payment. At half salary. I'd be underwater within 2 months. The math was ruthless, and Gavin had done it too. My phone buzzed. A text from the babysitter. Lily asking when you'll be home for dinner. I typed back. Soon, sweetie. Tell her I love her. But I couldn't move, couldn't drive home and pretend everything was fine while my world crumbled. The executive parking garage felt like a tomb. Concrete and shadows and the echo of my breathing. I thought about all the nights I'd missed tucking Lily in because of urgent calls from Gavin. The weekends sacrificed to proposals that couldn't wait. The vacation days surrendered to client emergencies. When Jason left, saying I loved my job more than our family, I'd defended Virexon. They were building my future. Our future. Some future this turned out to be. My laptop sat on the passenger seat. Without thinking, I opened it, needing distraction from the spiral of panic. LinkedIn loaded slowly on the garage's weak Wi-Fi. The familiar feed of corporate celebrations and humble brags felt surreal. People announcing promotions while I calculated food stamps. Then I saw it. A message notification from 2 months ago. Buried under the daily noise. Evan Hart, CEO of Nexora Solutions. I remembered him from the Strategic Innovation Summit in September. He'd approached me after my presentation on market penetration strategies, said he was impressed. We'd exchanged cards, pleasantries, the usual dance. His message was simple. Charlotte, your presentation was the highlight of the summit. If you ever consider new opportunities, I'd love to discuss how Nexora could benefit from your expertise. No pressure, just keeping the door open. I'd ignored it then. I was loyal, I was integral, I was an idiot. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Nexora was Virexon's biggest competitor, had been eating into our market share for 3 years. Gavin spent half his all-hands meetings ranting about them, calling Evan a vulture and worse. But vultures only circle the dying. Before I could overthink it, I typed, "Perhaps it's time we had that conversation." Send. The rain had stopped. Through the garage's exit, I could see a sliver of sky, clearer now. My phone rang immediately. Not a text, not an email, a call. Charlotte? Evan's voice was warm, surprised. I honestly didn't expect to hear from you. Things change, I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. They do indeed. Are you free for coffee tomorrow morning, say 7:30? There's a place called Meridian, downtown, quiet, discreet. I'll be there. Charlotte? He paused. I don't know what's happening at Virexon, but I want you to know, this isn't charity. I've watched your work for 2 years. What I'm offering is purely strategic. After we hung up, I sat for another moment. Then I started the car, drove home, and hugged Lily extra tight. I made her favorite mac and cheese, helped with homework, read 2 bedtime stories instead of 1. I didn't check my work email once. That night, I pulled out my employment contract and read every line. There it was, buried in subsection 3.4. Any reduction in compensation exceeding 25% shall be considered constructive termination, triggering full severance benefits. Gavin had made a mistake. He'd gotten greedy, tried to cut too deep, or maybe HR hadn't caught it. Either way, he'd handed me a loaded gun. I opened my personal laptop and began making lists. Client contacts, project histories, every relationship I'd built, every deal I'd closed. Not company property, these were relationships. And relationships, I'd learned, were personal. Tomorrow. Gavin expected me to crawl back, beaten and grateful for scraps. Tomorrow, Gavin would learn exactly how wrong he was. Meridian was exactly as Evan described, quiet, discreet, with leather booths that swallowed conversations. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered black coffee, and watched the door. My hands were steady now. The panic from yesterday had crystallized into something harder, clearer. Evan Hart walked in at 7:25, scanning the room until he found me. He looked exactly as I remembered, early 50s, silver at the temples. The kind of casual confidence that came from building something from scratch. His company, unlike Gavin's inherited kingdom. Charlotte. He slid into the booth across from me. I'm glad you reached out. Let's skip the dance, Evan. I set down my cup. You know why I'm here. The question is whether what you're offering is real or just an attempt to fish for intel. He laughed, genuine, surprised. Direct. I like that. All right, cards on the table. He leaned forward. Nexora needs someone who understands enterprise development at scale. We've got great products, but we're hitting walls with major accounts. The same walls you've been demolishing at Virexon for years. And VP of Strategic Development. Base salary 30% above your actual current, not whatever insult Gavin just threw at you. Full benefits, equity participation, and complete autonomy to build your team. The number he named made my poker face slip for just a second. It was more than fair. It was transformative. I don't need charity. I echoed his words from yesterday. This isn't charity. His voice hardened. 3 months ago, you turned Kane Brewer from a Nixora prospect into Virexon's biggest win. That single deal cost us $8 million in projected revenue. So no, Charlotte, this isn't kindness. This is me recognizing that having you across the table costs more than having you at it. Kane Brewer, my relationship, my cultivation, my close. But in Gavin's world, it was Virexon's win, full stop. What about non-competes? I asked. I have excellent lawyers. More importantly, constructive termination tends to void restrictive covenants. I assume that's relevant. He'd done his homework. Of course he had. I need autonomy, I said. Real autonomy. Not the promise of it that evaporates the moment I disagree with leadership. Done. And I bring my relationships. The clients work with me, not just the logo on my business card. That's exactly what I'm counting on. We talked for another hour. Strategy, vision. The kind of conversation I used to have with Gavin before he became more concerned with his yacht than his company. Evan asked real questions, challenged my assumptions, listened to my answers. It felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. I'll need the offer in writing, I said finally. You'll have it by noon. He stood, then paused. Charlotte, can I ask what changed? 2 months ago, you wouldn't even return my message. I thought about lying, spinning some story about seeking new challenges. But I was tired of corporate theater. Yesterday, my CEO told me I was worth half of what he paid me. After 8 years of loyalty, after saving his ass more times than I can count, he decided I was expendable, or worse, that I was trapped. Gavin Rhodes is a fool, Evan said simply. His loss, my gain. Not your gain yet. I haven't accepted. You will. He smiled. Because you're not just angry. You're awake. And people like us, once we're awake, we don't go back to sleep. After he left, I sat finishing my coffee, thinking about his words. He was right. Something had shifted yesterday in that parking garage. Not just anger at Gavin, but clarity about my own value. For years, I'd let them define my worth, in salary, in title, in their conditional approval. My phone buzzed. An email from Virexon HR, reminder about my meeting with Gavin at 8:30. I had 90 minutes to decide who I wanted to be, the grateful single mother who accepted scraps, or the executive who knew her worth. I ordered another coffee and opened my laptop. The offer from Evan arrived at 11:47, 12 minutes early. Everything he'd promised, in writing, plus a signing bonus that would cover 3 months of expenses. At the bottom, a handwritten note scanned in. The best revenge is massive success. Let's build something that makes them remember why they should have valued you. I smiled, my first real smile in 48 hours. Gavin was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the cost of underestimating people. I walked into Virexon at 8:25, carrying nothing but my laptop bag and a manila folder. The receptionist gave me the same bright smile as always, oblivious to the execution scheduled in 5 minutes. The elevator ride felt different this time, not ascending to humiliation, but to liberation. Gavin's assistant barely looked up. He's waiting for you. Inside, the stage was set for my capitulation. Gavin behind his desk, flanked by Margaret from HR with her practiced sympathy face and a stack of revised contracts. They'd even arranged the chairs, one isolated seat facing the tribunal. Charlotte, good morning. Gavin's voice oozed false warmth. I trust you've had time to consider our discussion? I have. I remained standing. Margaret shuffled her papers. We've prepared the documentation for your continuation with the adjusted compensation structure. I want to assure you that I won't be signing those. I placed my folder on Gavin's desk, centered precisely on his leather desk pad. His smile flickered. Charlotte, let's be reasonable. In this economy, I interrupted. Executives who know their worth have options. Did you know, Gavin, that your own contract terms define any salary reduction over 25% as constructive termination? The color drained from Margaret's face. She started flipping through her papers frantically. Which means, I continued, that your offer yesterday actually fired me, with full severance, 3 months' pay, continued benefits, and, this is my favorite part, immediate vesting of my equity shares. Now wait a minute. Gavin started to stand. I'm not finished. My voice cut through his bluster. Inside that folder is my formal notification of constructive termination, effective immediately. Below that, you'll find a letter from my attorney confirming the applicable statutes. And at the bottom, because I believe in transparency, is my signed offer letter from Nixora Solutions. The silence was exquisite. Margaret had stopped shuffling papers. Gavin's jaw worked soundlessly. You went to Evan Hart? The words came out strangled. Evan came to me. 2 months ago, actually. I turned him down because I believed in loyalty. Funny how a 50% pay cut clarifies one's priorities. You can't. Gavin's executive composure cracked. The non-compete. Void. Constructive termination. Remember? Your decision, not mine. Though I should thank you, Nixora's offer is 40% above my current salary, my full current salary. I watched him do the math, saw the moment he realized his cost-cutting measure had just handed his biggest competitor a weapon. Charlotte, please. Margaret tried for damage control. Perhaps we were hasty. I'm sure we can revisit the terms. No. One word. 8 years of meetings, of negotiations, of playing their games, reduced to one word. My personal items have already been collected. My company devices are with IT, wiped and returned per policy. My final expense report was submitted this morning. I picked up my bag. Oh, and Gavin, you might want to clear your calendar for the next few weeks. Several major accounts have asked for transition meetings. They seem concerned about continuity. You contacted our clients? His face flushed purple. I didn't contact anyone, but when people heard I was leaving, they reached out. Apparently, some business relationships are more personal than you assumed. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. You know what the real irony is? If you'd offered me a 20% cut, I probably would have taken it. I would have been grateful to keep my job, found a way to make it work. But you got greedy. You saw a single mother and thought, easy target. I looked him straight in the eye. I spent 8 years building your empire. Let's see how long it takes you to understand what that was worth. The walkout was different than any exit I'd ever made from that building. Not the exhausted trudge after another late night or the harried rush between meetings. This was measured, deliberate. Final. My phone started buzzing before I reached my car. Texts, calls, emails from colleagues who'd already heard. News traveled fast in corporate towers. I ignored them all except one, a text from my assistant Tracy. HR is in full panic mode. Gavin's been screaming at legal for 20 minutes. Are you okay? I typed back, better than okay. Take care of yourself, Tracy, and update your resume. The ship is about to get rocky. Sitting in my car, I pulled out Evan's offer letter and signed the last page. Monday morning, I'd walk into Nixora not as a refugee but as a conqueror. Gavin thought he was cutting costs. Instead, he'd cut his own throat. The best part? He'd handed me the knife. By noon the next day, Charlotte's phone was a wildfire of notifications, emails, direct messages, even texts from numbers she hadn't saved. It started small, a short LinkedIn message from Danielle Cross, the procurement lead at Kane & Brewer, Virexon's largest client. Heard you're moving. Where are you now? Charlotte read it twice, her heart thudding, not with fear, but with a strange, quiet anticipation. She typed back, fingers steady. Nexora Solutions. Less than 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed again. Danielle's reply was curt. We'll be in touch. By early afternoon, the pattern became impossible to ignore. A voicemail from Stephen Hall, Director of Operations at Meridian Logistics, landed in her inbox. We worked with you, not with Virex then. Call me when you have a moment. Then an email from Clara Morrison, account executive at Arctis Ventures, who Charlotte hadn't spoken to in months. Gavin told us you're gone. Guess who's rethinking our contract? Where can we send a new proposal? Charlotte sat at her new desk in Nexora's downtown office, watching the messages roll in like an incoming tide she couldn't, and didn't want to, stop. Evan Hart had given her the title and the seat. But this was hers, earned over years of calming nervous clients, rescuing doomed projects, and answering late-night calls no one else would pick up. Every ping of her phone echoed the same truth. They hadn't been loyal to the company. They'd been loyal to her. Charlotte scrolled through a long email chain forwarded by Brandon Walsh, a senior project manager at Nexora. It detailed an inquiry from Summit Tech Solutions, another client she'd handled at Virexon. The last line froze her in place. We're following Charlotte Miller. If she's with Nexora, so are we. She leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of those words settle. By 3 p.m., she had silenced her phone just to focus on onboarding briefs. But the buzz wouldn't stop. Colleagues walked past her desk, some exchanging knowing glances. A few smiled discreetly. Charlotte didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The numbers and the clients spoke for her. At exactly 3:08, another message blinked across her screen. This one from a name she hadn't seen in over a year, Graham Porter, an independent consultant who once worked with both Nexora and Virexon on a major joint venture. They're going to feel this. Charlotte exhaled slowly, staring at the simple sentence. No exclamation marks, no flair, just a quiet statement of fact. And she believed it. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about seeing the truth finally unfold. A truth Gavin Rhodes had refused to see. By sundown, reports started circulating in the local business networks. Soft whispers that Virexon had lost 3 major accounts within 48 hours. An industry blog hinted at an internal exodus and key client transfers linked to senior leadership shifts. Charlotte didn't share, repost, or comment. She simply watched and worked. Because this wasn't the climax. This was just the ripple before the wave hit. It was the 4th Monday since Charlotte had walked out of Virexon when her phone lit up with a name she hadn't seen in months. Gavin Rhodes. She stared at the screen, letting it ring twice before answering. Her voice even. This is Charlotte. There was a moment of static, then Gavin's voice, carefully modulated, too rehearsed to sound sincere. Charlotte, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. She leaned back in her chair, crossing one leg over the other. I'm at work. Yes, of course, I'll be brief. A faint cough on the other end. We've been monitoring the recent shifts, particularly with certain client portfolios. I think it's time we opened a dialogue about possible re-engagement, restoring trust. Charlotte almost smiled. His voice cracked slightly on that last phrase. Restoring trust. Like it was something you could summon with a phone call. She let out a soft, humorless breath. You didn't lose me the day I walked out, Gavin, she said, her tone steady. You lost me the moment you treated me like a disposable cost on a spreadsheet. There was silence, just long enough for her words to land. Then Gavin tried again, his voice taking on a pleading edge. I want to be clear. The decision on your compensation. It wasn't a reflection of senior leadership. There were pressures, misalignments in communication. It wasn't personal. Charlotte cut him off, her voice dropping lower. You built that culture. Don't act surprised when it turned on the people who kept your company alive. On the other end, Gavin inhaled sharply. His facade was cracking. Surely, there's a way forward, some arrangement we can discuss. Charlotte's lips curved into something cold. There isn't a pause. She let the silence stretch. You didn't just lose an employee, Gavin. You lost loyalty. And that's something you don't get to buy back with desperation and hollow offers. Another beat of silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Gavin said, "We'll stay in touch then." Charlotte's answer was calm, absolute. No need. She ended the call, gently, like closing a door that would never open again. The quiet that followed was not empty. It was full of clarity, of closure. Charlotte placed her phone face down on the desk. Outside her window, the sun hit the glass of downtown Denver like a silent witness. For the first time, Gavin Rhodes had called her, not to command, not to threaten, but to beg. And she had given him nothing. The following morning, Charlotte arrived at Nixora headquarters before most of the staff. The early light washed over the open plan office, soft and golden against the steel and glass. She sipped her coffee in silence, reviewing onboarding plans for 2 more high-profile clients moving over from Virexon. Her schedule for the day was packed: client briefings, a strategy session with Evan, and a cross-department alignment call. Yet, none of it felt overwhelming. She wasn't fighting for survival anymore. She was steering the ship. At precisely 9 a.m., Charlotte stepped into Nixora's executive conference room. The leadership team rose as she entered, not out of obligation, but with quiet respect. Evan made the brief introductions, and Charlotte nodded with calm confidence. No need to prove anything, not today, not ever again. The agenda moved fast: new client integrations, market realignment strategies, resource allocation. Several teams had already begun restructuring around Charlotte's growing portfolio. Evan made it official in the meeting. Effective immediately, Charlotte will lead the Strategic Growth Division for Nixora, he announced. Her leadership isn't just reshaping how we serve our clients, it's redefining how we operate. There were no polite applause or forced smiles, just a solid, collective understanding among the team. They knew. They had seen. By noon, Charlotte had signed off on 3 major strategic initiatives and quietly intervened in a high-stakes negotiation with a European client, one that used to be exclusive to Virexon. And the message was clear across the market. Virexon wasn't bleeding out because of a bad quarter. They were collapsing because they had let go of the one person holding them together. Late in the afternoon, Evan stopped by her office. He leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, his expression measured. "You realize you've shifted an entire market in under a month," he said. Charlotte gave a small, knowing smile. "I didn't plan to take them down," she replied. "I just stopped holding them up." Evan nodded once, silently acknowledging the weight of her words, before turning to leave. As evening settled over Denver, Charlotte sat alone in her office, gazing out at the city skyline. The world outside buzzed with a quiet hum of life, unaware that in one corner of the business world, a quiet, calculated storm had just rewritten the rules of power. She wasn't chasing validation anymore. She wasn't proving her worth to anyone. She was living it. And somewhere, on the other side of town, Gavin Rhodes would be staring at the unraveling pieces of his kingdom, realizing far too late that some people aren't replaceable. Charlotte closed her laptop softly and leaned back in her chair, a quiet satisfaction settling in her chest. Her fight was over, her victory undeniable.